Hey, how we doing today? My name's Fred Bork. This is my informative speech that I got to do. No, I don't have an audience. I don't have any friends. But anyways, I'm going to talk to you today about internal combustion engines. So let's first start off that you need three things with an internal combustion engine. You need spark, air, and fuel. Those are the three main things that will make your motor run. Now, you also need other different things like oil, cooling, antifreeze, stuff like that to keep your engine safe and lubricated. Without lubrication, your engine will lock up in no time, and it ain't worth anything if it's locked up because it doesn't move. So we'll start out with the basics. You got your spark plug, which is in the cylinder head, and the cylinder head has a hole in it where the piston goes. Now, that chamber in there is called the combustion chamber. What goes in there, air and fuel, gets sucked in through the intake, pushed into the cylinder heads, into that combustion chamber. With that air-fuel mixture, it is in the right perspective, at the right ratio of air to fuel. With the right compression, with the piston coming up, will spark, explode, and go back down. Now, this happens if you have a V6, which is a 6-cylinder. This happens in every cylinder, and they're all timed. An engine has a crankshaft and a camshaft. Now the pistons are connected to the crankshaft. That crankshaft has a gear on the end or a pulley. Most of the time it's a gear just to keep the timing in better. Or you'll have a chain that goes up to the camshaft. All this has to be timed to make everything work how it's supposed to. Without timing, it's not going to run. You got to make sure the valve's open, which is where the air-fuel mixture goes through into the head. Now, that's also a very important thing. You go from air to fuel, explosion, shoves piston down, shoves another one up, and this keeps going 1,000 times a minute. And that's how you measure RPMs. Stands for revolutions per minute. Now, one revolution is each of those pistons going up and down in a full cycle. So if you have V6, it'll go around all 6 explode. That's 1 RPM. Now, if you look at your gauge on your car, when you're driving down the road, it's probably going to read around, say you're going 55 and you got a V8. Here we go. About 2,500 RPM, you'll be going, that's how many times that motor is going up and down per minute, per cylinder. Now, if you ask me, that's a pretty crazy amount. Now, something also you'll have is with all that explosions going on inside that internal combustion engine, you're going to have something to cool it. There it comes in two things. Oil, which is in the bottom of it, and that keeps things cool. For the main part, it's more of like a lubricator. Keeps the crankshaft and the camshaft, it shoves it through the whole motor. Keeps everything lubed up so it's not locking up. Then there's also antifreeze. You pour antifreeze in through the radiator. Now the radiator has usually a water pump in the engine is turned by a belt, which the belt pulley is usually connected to the crankshaft. So that'll turn the water pump, pull water from the radiator throughout the engine, and then back around through the radiator again. Now the radiator is an important part of the system because as you're driving down the road, air goes through that radiator and cools down the coolant that is going through the engine. And usually most vehicles run about 212. That's like the most common temperature for a vehicle to run safely, and you're not going to melt your heads or blow anything up for the most part. Definitely recommended. That's another thing you have to have. Now, one of the nice things is you also have to have spark. That's the whole spark plug that's inside the cylinder head. That spark plug is also timed in a way that usually on the older vehicles they have things called distributors. And what it was the camshaft turned a gear, which turned the distributor, which sent spark to each individual spark plug. And that also, you have to time that according to your camshaft position and your crankshaft position. All those things tie together, and it's super important that you make sure that they're timed or you're not going to go anywhere. Now, most vehicles of the 90s era, maybe early 2000s, They're known to go upwards of 250,000 miles. It's getting to the point where they're talking gas motors go up to 300,000. But diesels, they usually last quite a bit longer. They're the same concept, but instead of being a spark plug in a diesel, there is no spark plug. All it is when the diesel is compressed at a certain rate, it explodes. And that's how it does it. That's why they got so much more power. Now I'm also going to show you a little visual aid here. It's a little old, but this is a mechanic set. Something you're going to use when you're working on cars, because it's got pretty well everything you need for most motors you're going to work on. And it's definitely handy. It comes in a nice little kit. You can buy this at, local AutoZone, Walmart. Anybody's got it. And it's always good to have. I'm a big Craftsman's fan, so that works out pretty good. Well, I hope this did you well and taught you a little about internal combustion engines. Well, stay classy.